The world is not going to forget what Israel did in Gaza. Israel and the United States are efforts to keep settler colonialism alive. Gaza could at any point spill over and become an event that is not only catastrophic, but changes all economic systems and confronts world trade, world economic stability with as serious a challenge as can come from anything else.
What's happening in Gaza right now will shock the world for generations, and economist Richard Wolff sees something terrifying that most people are missing entirely. While Americans struggle to afford basic housing, their government sends billions to fund what Wolff describes as the final desperate gasps of white colonialism trying to control the global South. But here's the part that should make every politician sweat. Even Trump's MAGA base is starting to ask uncomfortable questions about where their tax dollars are really going.
The only country of any significance that supports Israel at this point, given what it has done and is doing, is the United States.
Wolff identifies something unprecedented happening in American politics that nobody saw coming. For the first time in modern history, even segments of Trump's most loyal supporters are questioning American financial support for Israel. These are people who typically rally behind anything labeled as supporting allies. Yet they're now doing basic math. How can we send $10 million overseas when our own people can't afford housing?
The government in Ireland recognized the Palestinians as a separate people. Spain has done it. The French are about to do it. Even the British.
Internationally, Wolff points out a pattern that should terrify Washington insiders. Germany just suspended arms shipments to Israel, and they were the second largest weapons supplier after the United States. Spain has recognized Palestinian statehood. Ireland did it years ago. France is moving in that direction. Britain is having serious conversations about it. According to Wolff, only one country of any significance still supports Israel given what it has done: the United States.
The United States is providing Israel with vast sums of money and weapons.
Gaza represents what Wolff calls an fundamentally unfair fight that decent Americans should recognize immediately. Israel's army and air force, one of the most powerful in the world, is waging war against what he describes as a refugee camp with no army, no air force, and no effective defense. The United States provides Israel with vast sums of money and weapons, while no one comparably supports the refugees whose society is being systematically destroyed.
Because it's hard for Americans to look at the pictures that you can see of what those atomic bombs did.
Wolff draws a chilling historical parallel that explains why Gaza will haunt the world's conscience forever. He reminds us that this year marks the 80th anniversary of America dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the only time in human history nuclear weapons were used by one country against another's citizens. Americans still bear the guilt of that extraordinary step, and the world will never forget those images. Similarly, Wolff argues, the world will never forget what Israel did in Gaza, creating a permanent stain upon Israel's history and reputation.
And because of the peculiar relationship between Israel as a country and Jewish people all over the world, it's going to be a burden for those Jewish people to carry. Not that they need it, but they will have no choice.
Jewish people worldwide will carry an unfair burden because of Netanyahu's government actions, according to Wolff. Due to the peculiar relationship between Israel as a country and Jewish communities globally, millions of innocent people will face consequences for policies they never supported. Wolff emphasizes that the Jewish community in America is split just like everywhere else, with the majority not supporting Netanyahu's actions in Gaza.
36% of Americans support Israeli policy, 55% don't.
polling data reveals something that should shake every politician to their core. Wolff cites Gallup's most recent numbers, showing that only 36% of Americans support Israeli policy, while 55% oppose it. This isn't a minority opinion that can be ignored or suppressed. It represents the dominant position of the American people, yet somehow the government continues funding policies that most citizens reject.
What the United States is doing and what Israel is doing as the last desperate gasps of white colonialism trying to control what we now call the global South.
Colonialism is what Wolff believes we're really witnessing, and his analysis cuts through all the diplomatic language to expose the ugly truth. He argues that Israel and the United States represent efforts to keep settler colonialism alive in an age when the rest of the world has moved beyond it, America trying to succeed in its colonial project. Israel is attempting the same approach with Palestinians.
They don't have domestic opposition here because we genocidally killed off the indigenous population of this country. The resistance of the people of Gaza, what they have endured and stayed there, is absolute. We will be wondering and trying to understand not only why the Israelis could and did do what they did, but where did the strength come from?
Resistance throughout history shows us that colonial projects eventually fail, and Wolff sees something extraordinary in Palestinian endurance that colonial powers never anticipated. Despite everything they've suffered, Palestinians remain in Gaza. Wolff marvels at where this strength comes from, calling their endurance absolutely extraordinary in the face of systematic destruction. This resistance pattern has defeated colonial powers before, and Wolff suggests it will succeed again.
Yale University, which I know best, the largest single source of income over the last 50 years, has been government money. Your money, my money, the taxes we pay. They don't pay any taxes. We pay the taxes of the cops that the university calls in to show our government that they're in line in supporting Israel.
Universities across America reveal how threatened the establishment feels by genuine democratic discourse, according to Wolff's analysis. As a lifelong professor at Yale, University of Massachusetts, and New School, he's watched his own institutions call police to arrest peaceful student demonstrators. These students studied the situation, developed informed positions, and engaged democratically in politics. Yet they get riot-geared police instead of applause. Here's something Wolff emphasizes that mainstream economists won't tell you, and if understanding these global shifts matters to your future, subscribing helps ensure more people access perspectives the establishment wants suppressed. Economic implications of this moral isolation are what Wolff, as an economist, finds most concerning for America's future. When commentators discuss geopolitical risk, they're using fancy language for wars that could spill over and challenge world economic stability. The combination of lopsided wars that are basically massacres, supported by world powers like the United States, represents a dangerous threat to global peace and economic well-being.
Lest it be abused, this movement, to deal with and to overcome anti-Semitism. And that's exactly what the government of Israel is now doing.
Anti-Semitism accusations are being weaponized in ways that Wolff finds deeply troubling as someone who has fought discrimination his entire life. He argues that Israel's government is abusing the legitimate movement against anti-Semitism by claiming that criticizing Israeli policy equals anti-Semitism. Wolff calls this an abuse that will damage the real fight against anti-Semitism, noting that millions of Jews, both inside and outside Israel, oppose their government's policies without being anti-Semitic.
I mean, try to turn this around and imagine if it was happening in an Islamic country to Christians. What kind of talk there would be.
America's position grows more dangerous each day, according to Wolff's geopolitical analysis. Every weapons shipment to Israel, every diplomatic shield at the United Nations gets broadcast to 1.8 billion Muslims worldwide and billions of others who view these actions as an endorsement of systematic destruction. Wolff asks Americans to imagine if this was happening to Christians in an Islamic country, the global outrage would be immediate and universal.
Headlines of a recent day or two that shipment of arms by the United States to Israel has been interrupted or postponed, even whether we know that's true or not, even if it happened, this is Mr. Biden speaking out of both sides of his mouth. He wants it all, like cheap politicians usually do.
Biden's recent speeches perfectly illustrate what Wolff calls political dishonesty at its worst. The president claims to interrupt arms shipments while simultaneously maintaining massive military aid, speaking out of both sides of his mouth like a cheap politician who wants to appear both for and against the same policy. Wolff suggests understanding Biden's speeches requires recognizing this fundamental contradiction.
We live at the end of a century of anti-colonialism. Those little countries in Europe don't control anything anymore.
Global perspective shows America and Israel increasingly isolated as the world moves beyond colonial thinking. Wolff notes that those little countries in Europe once controlled vast empires. The British used to say the sun never set on the British Empire because they had so much land everywhere. Eventually, those empires told Europeans to go home, which is why Britain doesn't control India or Africa anymore.
Thoughtful people across the political spectrum, even among MAGA folks, yes. There is the question, and it's been there a while. Is this a smart move to connect the United States with something that every Arab person and every Muslim person around the world sees as a horrific assault?
Money that could solve American problems instead flows overseas to fund what most of the world considers systematic destruction. While Americans can't afford housing, their government sends billions to support military operations that violate international opinion. Wolff sees this as unsustainable, both economically and morally, creating domestic resentment even among traditionally supportive populations.
Majority of all the students involved had no interest in violence. Their interest was in making a protest about the policies of Israel in the Gaza, the policies of the United States supporting it.
Students across American campuses represent hope for democratic engagement, according to Wolff's observations. These young people studied complex international situations, developed informed opinions, and participated peacefully in political discourse. They kept protests nonviolent because violence would discourage other students from joining, exactly the kind of thoughtful political engagement democracy requires. Instead of support, they received militarized police responses.
Israel is trying to do that also to the Palestinians. It's not going to work.
Change is inevitable, according to Wolff's historical analysis. Whether American politicians recognize it or not, the era of anti-colonialism that ended European empires is far from over. Settler colonialism's last desperate attempts to maintain control through military force will fail, just as they failed everywhere else. The only question is how much damage America will do to itself trying to prevent the inevitable. Wolff sees the writing on the wall that most Americans are missing entirely. We're witnessing the final chapter of Western colonial dominance, funded by American taxpayers who increasingly reject these policies. The world is moving beyond us, leaving America isolated and increasingly irrelevant, clinging to strategies that history has already proven unsustainable. What do you think about Trump sending your dollars to Israel for creating brutal chaos in the world? Subscribe to our channel to stay updated with the world economic situation overlooked by political mess.